Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto manga chapter review. So this one, of course, is the review for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 1. This is the start of post-timeskip Boruto with the restart here at Chapter 1 with the new subtitle here. There's a real sense where like, okay, we are leaving the whole Boruto, Naruto Next Generation stuff behind. It is truly Boruto here. Not exactly sure what the whole 2 Blue Vortex necessarily kind of means, but you know, it's a somewhat interesting title that makes you kind of think about some stuff here. So yeah, we've been off for, what, 3, 4, 5 months or something like that. It's been quite a while since we have had a chapter. Obviously, in the meantime, we did get the Minato chapter, which I did review on the channel here. The anime, I think, will be coming back in the next week or two with some Naruto episodes, and then hopefully that'll lead into the return of the Boruto anime. So it seems like the return is well and truly kind of happening here. But yes, we have the official release of 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 1 here. Obviously, leaks have been out for a while. You've probably seen a lot of the hype going around as people have been spreading all the little reveals that have happened about character redesigns for the time skip and stuff like that. So we're basically here, and that's the kind of whole idea. So most of this video will be going through the kind of chapter page by page, giving my thoughts, but I will give some general thoughts on the chapter here up front. Overall, I enjoyed the chapter. I like especially that by the end of it, it feels like we are like right into the middle of something that it felt like they could have almost executed at almost any point for like the last bunch of chapters. It feels like we're finally getting to the whole idea of like Code. What are we actually doing with Code? When is he going to attack? When will he? When won't he? It seems like we're just going for that now, and we're having this kind of three-way showdown between basically Boruto, Kawaki, and Code, which is happening, I guess, before we build to the big Boruto, Kawaki stuff, which still seems like it's a little bit off into the future, which is the stuff we're trying to build towards from the very first chapter of Boruto, because Boruto's design here doesn't match the design of Boruto in that opening chapter. Same with Kawaki's design. So is that a further little bit of a time skip into the future? Or will we just see a kind of costume change for some of these characters after like an arc or two? We don't really know exactly how to kind of align this with the chapter 1 stuff in terms of, are they just kind of retconning what their designs actually are, or are we still getting towards that stuff? To me, that's the strength of a lot of what we kind of do in this chapter. It's just that in one chapter we jump straight into the action and we're not kind of messing around too much doing stuff. But on the other side of things, I think the chapter is held back from being as absolutely blow away amazing as it possibly could be, because I don't think they really knew what level of kind of recap they needed to do here, how introductory they needed to be here for a chapter 1, a relaunch, you know, how much did they need to acknowledge the time off that the series has had. And so even though it's a longer than usual chapter, it's like 50 something pages, like 51 or 2 pages instead of like 40 pages, it still doesn't really feel that way. It still has that classic Boruto pacing where you end it and are kind of like, where's the rest? That they spent quite a bit of this chapter going over stuff we already knew. Made a little bit better by the fact that it was the characters in their new time skip designs talking about this stuff, but still some of the scenes did feel a little bit awkward, that 3 years later we're still talking about stuff that is like information that we knew about from 3 years ago. That's a bit frustrating and awkward, and I think they maybe leaned a little bit too much into too introductory, too recappy, though I give them a little bit of leeway just because it is a somewhat complicated dynamic with the whole idea of the character swap between the memories of how the characters like interpret Boruto and Kawaki being swapped. That is a bit of a complicated dynamic, but I still feel they do a bit too much recap. So the strengths are that we get straight into the action. I think a lot of the character redesigns and some of the little setups that we do get in some of these scenes is great. It's just, I think, held back by being too introductory, too recap focused. But let's go through it, and I'll kind of point out the moments where it's good and the moments where I think they didn't need to do as much recap. So we start off with a color page here. It is Sarada in her new design, about to enter the Hokage office here. So Sarada's design is one of those ones where I'm like, I overall think it's like fine, but I also wouldn't mind too much if the anime, when it gets to kind of covering the time skip, maybe chooses to do one of those kind of redesigns where they maybe do it differently than the manga. We did it with the original Sarada design that Ikemoto had in the series. We've done it with like Hinata and stuff like that. We haven't done straight up manga designs for some of these characters, which I think is for the best. It's purely the idea of, from a style kind of point of view, it's like, it's a cool design, but the character's meant to be a ninja, and here she is with these huge kind of platform kind of sandals that she's kind of wearing, and it just kind of feels a little bit like, come on, like, just, you know, a little bit more practical. And I think this is a kind of pretty ideal design. Nothing too like crazy though in regards to my opinions on it. Then we get a double page splash here, you know, Boruto, 2 blue Vortex. The chapter 1 here seems to just be called Boruto, and we get Boruto's design here, which similarly, I think I get what they're going for here. This is meant to be Boruto with the clear Sasuke inspiration because he has the sword now, belt, you know, it's so clearly inspired by Sasuke overall here, and it is cool. It's just maybe leaning a little bit too much, I think, towards sort of the style over the practicality of like, you're a ninja, can we just like hold it back like a little bit? And I usually, the way I associate like the anime designs is that they take a little bit of Ikemoto's like specific style out and just make it a little bit more Naruto feeling. So I'm interested to see specifically what they do with the anime kind of when we get around to it. But yeah, you know, again, it highlights the whole idea of like, 2 blue Vortex. What do we mean by that? Like, are the 2 blue Vortexes meant to be sort of like Boruto and Kawaki? Are we referring kind of like to Boruto's eyes or something like that? By Vortex, are we referring to kind of Rasengan-like stuff, which is kind of interesting given that the Minato chapter that we got was referring to like the whirl, and then like Vortex, you know, you have that kind of spiral-based imagery going on here. Not really sure though. But then we get into the first like normal kind of page here. So Sarada goes into the Hokage's office, and you're immediately wondering like, okay, who is going to be the Hokage? Who are the candidates of like the fill-in or new 8th Hokage? And you're like, okay, well, there's obviously Shikamaru. He could just step up to the role. Konoha doesn't feel like he's at all ready for it yet. There's Kakashi, who is of course still alive, who we could go back to because he was the Hokage before Naruto, and there's precedent for that happening before. Otherwise, you're kind of maybe thinking like, you know, do we like go over to like Sakura, but you think like she's probably too busy with a lot of the other stuff that's going on with her, and so it makes complete sense, I think, that they ultimately commit to the idea Shikamaru is the 8th Hokage. So that's what we get here, and what we get here is Sarada having an argument that it appears that she has had with Shikamaru many times over the last 3 years. This is just the most recent iteration of that. And obviously it makes sense that we need to see one of this to get her character. I think what we end this scene on is actually quite strong, but a lot of this does feel a little bit kind of like, yeah, it's too much of a recap of what we already know. It doesn't feel like Sarada's argument is kind of strong enough if she's been able to like have multiple attempts at this discussion with Shikamaru. But yeah, we just get the idea of like, you know, Boruto crossed the line. He's a traitor. He killed the Hokage. He tried to kill the Hokage's son. Sarada's point here is just that your entire premise is wrong. Boruto would never kill Lord 7th. At least give him a chance to explain like his side of things. Konoha points out, if he's not guilty, why did he run away? also we know from like Ada Senragon, like kind of what happened. Sarada's point here is actually quite decent. You know, if someone ordered your death, wouldn't you run too? Especially if you didn't, you know, believe that that's what actually happened. You know, listen to what he has to say. But Shikamaru kind of points out at this point that it's more of a case of, I've made my choice, but also the will of the people agree with the idea of not attempting to kind of bring back Boruto to listen to what he has to say. They're annoyed about his betrayal as well, and even if I rescind kind of my order, the people will still want what they want, and so it's kind of basically over here. He says, this is the last time we will speak of this. Get back to your mission. Sarada freaks out. Like, you blockhead. Konohamaru's like, this is Lord 8th you're talking to here, you know, calm down. But Shikamaru's like, no. Final point in a way here. Sarada, I'm worried about you. At this rate, forget Hokage. You'll never be more than Genin. And she says, 'cause my dad's a traitor too? Just like Boruto? This has nothing to do with Sasuke. I'm talking solely about your future as a Konoha shinobi. And she points out, and these last two panels, I think, with Sarada, I think are strong. Because this is where I feel like it is this specific manga here, Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, making a commitment to Sarada is going to be important in this phase of the story in a way that she never quite felt as important as she probably needed to be in the first half of the story. Lord 7th once brought my dad... Lord 7th once brought back my dad, who'd gone rogue and committed great crimes. He became Hokage while still a genin. My role model is Lord 7th, not you. And it's a really good point, and she just walks out at this point, because he's just pointed out that, like, you'll never be Hokage, like, you're only ever going to remain a genin. And she points out that, like, well, the person I look up to, that was their exact path to be Hokage. And in a way, they proved themselves worthy of the title because they committed to and went after someone who had gone rogue and brought them back. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do as well. And you are now saying that this is a terrible, bad, awful thing. Now, obviously, in this case, it's further complicated by the fact that there's a special crazy power that kind of caused this to happen. But I like the kind of similarity here, and that they're in this first chapter telling you again, this is Sarada's goal as a character, and now she has the whole idea of she'll get Boruto back. That's strong. And not to mention, like, her kind of standing up against the leadership of the Leaf Village. That is an element, a kind of edge to the character we didn't quite see before. And I think that's a good sign for her being used better in this manga than the first one. So from there, we cut to a small scene where we just see Kawaki in the kind of, the dimension where he holds all the stuff he brings out with his ocular jutsu, basically. And we see, of course, Naruto and Hinata are here in this kind of eternal sleep. I think the idea of this is that they haven't aged at all, that they are just timeless in here, which we were roughly, I think, kind of told before. So the idea, again, everyone else has aged up, they haven't, though, like with sort of Shikamaru, we wouldn't really maybe expect to see that age necessarily show on the likes of Naruto, just because of what age they are at this point. It's of course going to have a bigger impact on the younger characters than it is on the older characters. But still, Kawaki kind of feeling that he has to come in here, I suppose every so often, to check on them, highlights that it's not something he just forgets about. He still comes in here. Like, this in a way is his weird way of sort of quote-unquote protecting Naruto, and Naruto is still this person he deeply looks up to and respects, and this is his way of forever keeping him safe. But it's such a extreme way of doing it, to where, like, Naruto's not even, like, active in this kind of way. And it speaks to, obviously, the bad path that Kawaki has gone down. Something needs to change here, of course. This is the guilt in a way over kind of what he's done, the fact that he feels that he has to come in here and look at them like this. But then we cut to the aftermath of the first scene. So Sarada comes out of the Hokage office and meets up with Sumire. So we get to see her design here, and it's, you know, I think it's pretty nice once again. Again, they don't really say like what exactly is going on with them. I'm guessing Sumire remains in her position where she's like helping out with the kind of tech research and stuff like that. But the basic idea, this is where we get a little bit kind of recappy once again. She does mention like I was very harsh this time, even though I know it's not Shikamaru's fault. Sumire is the one to point out that like, yeah, Ada's omnipotence causes everyone to kind of be exactly like this, where to them, the two of us are the weird ones because we have this weird kind of almost indefensible opinion that we actually have an explanation for why Boruto did what he did, whereas everyone else can just see the bad in what actually happened. To them, Kawaki has always been the 7th Hokage's son. Uzumaki Kawaki, that's the truth. And Sarada says, yeah, and Boruto is a rebellious outsider and ungrateful traitor. They point out, this was said before to us, the idea that there is this kind of course correction aspect of the omnipotence where it solves logical inconsistencies by gradually making people sort of accept them. And we just get that idea here of like, yeah, a lot of people initially were asking questions like, wait, how does Naruto's son have a Kara modified body? Why is no one talking about Momoshiki anymore? What's going on here? But this unease, this doubt just went away over time. And that makes sense, I suppose, that the power would work in that way, to not just swap and then people be like, no, that's wrong, and then they just break out of it. They're trying to make the point that like this is not something that is that easy to break out of, and so just pointing out a logical inconsistency is not enough to make people go like, oh, I've seen the light, that it is kind of intelligent the way that this ability works to make people truly believe this is their reality and not just like accepting logical issues. So they go to see then Ada and Demon. And again, this is where we get very, very recappy like information. Demon's just like, you still ain't giving up, it's an unwinnable game, you know. Ada says, I have no control over omnipotence, just like my charm ability, though recently we've at least started to understand how it works. She then proceeds to tell us information that we already know about this ability. Now, I get to a certain degree that this is complicated by the fact that, like, some of this information I think we learned from Momoshiki, so I suppose Ada now knowing this herself is slightly different, but is still, for the audience, reading this, it is still recap that, like, they mentioned it's an Otsutsuki Shinjutsu, like a divine jutsu, we know that, of course. It makes one's desires real, of course, and that what happened here, the swap, is because of Kawaki's desire in the incident that happened in the last couple of chapters, of course. Everyone's memories were changed, and yeah, they basically view Boruto as Kawaki and Kawaki as Boruto. That's what happened. They swapped positions. They did a full like name swap, basically. That's the whole idea here. They do picture a variety of characters down here when talking about this. I suppose it, again, kind of confirming to us visually here. At the very least, all these characters are under the influence of the swap. So they have Shikamaru here, Sai, Inojin, Konohamaru, Mitsuki, Shikadai, Chocho, Himawari, and Sasuke, of course. So they do have Himawari here, but we'll get an interesting scene with Himawari in just a little bit. So, that's just nice to get that little bit of detail. Is there any way to reverse this, is the question that gets asked. No, and there's no use trying to basically, like, you know, convince people to break out of it, because they'll never understand. They will only ever think that you are the weird one for trying to basically almost, like, I suppose, gaslight them into thinking something different. That's the whole idea here. In her mind, it would be more practical to just rewrite different memories, though there's risk in that too. And that's interesting because you think about, like, maybe more long term, how are we going to resolve this? Because I don't think there's any way we just sort of like talk to people and everyone snaps out of it. So it feels like we kind of have to go through Ada to actually do the reverse on this, where maybe Boruto gets a chance to make his desires manifest through Ada's abilities, and he reverses what actually happens here. Now, that's a very kind of simplistic way of viewing it, but the implication there almost is like, do you do it just straight up reversed, or do you do it where like it's reversed and people don't remember what happened during the initial reversal? That's the kind of real question when we kind of get down to it and we're actually trying to fix all of this. Then we get to kind of what's a little bit more interesting in this scene, which is Ada kind of being like, I still find it mystifying how the two of you manage to retain your memories when you're not an Otsutsuki and you're also not family members of me. Because she points out again, her abilities don't work on Otsutsuki or blood family members, so that's why it doesn't work on Demon. And she's like, well, if that doesn't work, if the omnipotence didn't work on you two, then why should I believe that my charm still works on you, basically? She's pointing that out. Are you both really my captives under my spell? And we do get the flashback, effectively, to Shikamaru telling the two of them, well, if that's how it works, keep that up. Don't let her know that you are immune to her charm. Act like you are, so you can get close to her, because you might be the only two people in the whole village capable of killing Ada if the time comes to actually do that. And the kind of point in all of this is especially, do not let Demon know that you actually have the capacity to get close to Ada and not be affected by her abilities, because he is the most powerful character in the series. Again, let's not forget that. We were told that very heavily in the first part of the manga. Demon is the most powerful character in the series as far as we're aware. So, Sumire gives the explanation. Oh please, we've told you over and over, Sarada and I were just putting up a front to hide our feelings. I mean, come on, no one can escape being charmed by you, right? That's what I believe. True. But there's a lot of suspicious looks going on. Demon looking at Sarada, Sarada looking at Demon, Sumire's sweating a little bit because she's had to lie here. But it seems like we're okay for now, in that Demon I don't think is really going to act unless Ada really like asks him to necessarily. But that's an interesting thing. In terms of timeskip designs, like Ada looks relatively similar. She's just wearing like slightly different clothing. Demon, you think should look actually like quite a bit older, but he doesn't really look that different. But I suppose the way he's just positioned here, it's hard to maybe fully tell exactly. But it's just this tense situation, and it speaks to the positioning of, I suppose, Ada within the series overall, because is she ally or enemy at this point? And right now the idea is that she is actually more ally than enemy, because we had the whole conversation at the end of the first kind of part of the manga, which was basically that she doesn't like what Kawaki has turned into. And in a way, his wish kind of coming true like this, the swap happening, she hates the kind of cowardly aspect of the fact that he's kind of ran away from his problems by making this actually happen. And even though she still cares and wants to have a relationship with him, she wants it to be with the Kawaki that she actually sort of fell in love with, basically, not who he is right now. And so she wants Boruto to come back. She wants Boruto to knock some sense into Kawaki, and for this all to be reversed, the omnipotence stuff to be reversed. The question is, though, then, after that, what is her aim in all of this? Because, again, Ada's whole goal as a character is just that she wants a real romantic relationship. She doesn't seem to have any greater goals, despite her also being one of the most powerful characters in the series, with some of the most crazy, over-the-top, kind of broken abilities in the series. She doesn't have the ambition of a character you would assume who has that ability. But of course they have to be suspicious around her because she effectively controls Demon, who is the real kind of, like, I suppose, physical threat in all of this. And of course it's this weird situation where that means that Kawaki then technically has the ally of these the loyalty of these two powerful characters. And so if there is a situation where the village feels like, for the safety of everyone, we need to take Ada out, that's why Sarada and Sumire have to keep up the illusion of like, we are under your spell, we can just hide it better than others. So it's a weird one because they're ultimately allies in that everyone wants Boruto to succeed effectively in this situation. But then when we get back to maybe a normal situation, there's still that kind of tenseness of she's kind of invulnerable except to these two characters and then Kawaki and Boruto, obviously. So it's a very complex dynamic what they're going for here, because at the moment you're not really presented with like the situation where like Ada kind of goes against the village. The problem, I suppose, is when they actually resolve, I suppose, like say Boruto beats Kawaki or whatever, people are going to be wanting Kawaki to be like put away or maybe even killed. And that's when Ada is probably going to stand up and be like, I don't want that to happen. And she might assume and try and take over things. And so there's some complexities about the resolution and how things end up that are going to need to be solved very carefully, I think is the takeaway there. But then we cut over to an interesting scene here with Kawaki and Mitsuki. Again, this is very interesting post-swap because this is effectively meant to be a Mitsuki and Boruto scene, because that's who Mitsuki kind of used Kawaki as here. This is his son. But you see by the end of this scene that Mitsuki has some doubts. This is not the Boruto I knew before. Boruto would never act like this in this specific scene. Are you really the person who is super important to me? That's kind of the takeaway from this. And we know that like Mitsuki especially is like very anti like the betrayal of Kawaki. He really wants to go after Kawaki. So in this case, it's actually he really wants to go after Boruto. I want to protect you. I will kill him. I swear it. And Kawaki's just like, yeah, do as you please. Just quit following me around like some sick perv. It's annoying. And Mitsuki's taken aback by this because, of course, Boruto would never say something like that. But Kawaki, and he just goes off because he gets a report that there are claw marks that have been found outside the wall. The search squad has found them. He flies off, literally. And Mitsuki's just left there kind of being like what he was about to say. But you're the sun shining brightly upon my moon. Aren't you, Kawaki? And they leave it there. And it's the idea of that doubt, that little bit of doubt there. What does that mean in the context of this? Because everything they've said so far points to the idea that the omnipotence should quell those doubts and shift Mitsuki back to truly believing what actually happens. But they're almost leaning in the direction of, if you are super close to someone who has been directly kind of like swapped by this ability, you can see through the illusion in the right situation. And I think, even though I think a lot of people dismissed it at the time, is potentially the idea that the reason that like Sarada and Sumire are immune to the omnipotence in this specific context, is it actually because the two of them both have very strong feelings towards Boruto. And maybe the idea that because it is love, that can't be altered by the omnipotence power. That their vision of who they deeply care about so much can't be altered by that power. Is that kind of what they're going for here? For Ada, given that it's ultimately her power, that's a very interesting kind of concept with the idea of like what is true love for Ada when there are only like a handful of people who aren't immediately affected by her other power. That would be a very interesting kind of thing to highlight. And then again, we'll see it with the Himawari scene in a second, that there's the kind of familial kind of love, highlighting how she seems to be able to doubt her way through aspects of what's going on. How one of Boruto's close friends in Mitsuki is also beginning to have his doubts. Is that kind of what they're going for here? Where like there is a sense of like the people you truly, truly care about, who are really, really close to you, just will forever have a much stronger vision of who the person was before their memories were altered, that you can't ever truly change that, and they will be able to go against the course correction aspect of the omnipotence. So we then cut to the Himawari scene. So Himawari, of course, is one of the characters you most obviously see the kind of idea of the time skip. Like she is now in a sparring match against Chocho, and we see like her hair is longer. I think her design is actually pretty good and really kind of fits the idea that I'm guessing she's going to be a little bit more heavily involved in the story. They seem to be kind of positioning her where like, oh yeah, we could do some stuff with her. Whereas I think before she was always kind of just the little sister character and we'll do a little bit with, but I think there's definitely the possibilities for her to be better used going forward. So yeah, we get this sparring scene between Himawari and Chocho. Nothing too fancy here in that ultimately it's just some taijutsu. Himawari throws some shurikens. Chocho does some expansion jutsu, then human boulder, and gets the victory in their little sparring match. At this point, the other members of Inoshika-cho arrive on the scene, so Shikadai and Inojin, and they're like, Himawari, like your moves are exceptionally sharp, you sure are Kawaki's little sis, all right. You did really, really well, fantastic. The one slight criticism is that you shouldn't have jumped so kind of recklessly in a way into the air. That's what lost you the battle. Highlighting that, yes, when you do a giant jump into the air, you're vulnerable while in the air. Be careful when you choose to do that. Chocho does praise her, though. The first kick was super good, really, really solid. And the question is asked of Himawari, why do you want to get so strong? And she says, it's not that I want to get so strong. It's just that I feel like everyone in Konoha would yell at me for saying this, but I kind of want to help Boruto, you see. They're like, what? You don't really mean that, do you? But she says, sorry, I know it sounds wacky, but how do I put it? What everyone says about him is totally different from what I remember of him. And Shikadai says, but he killed your dad, remember? But she says, I don't think he did. I mean, I saw with my own eyes him risking his life to protect my dad and me. Such a person wouldn't kill my dad. There has to be some explanation. And if that is the case, Boruto's got to be in deep trouble. Besides, I have this feeling that my dad is still alive somewhere. So, we have the slight element of doubt with Mitsuki at the end, regards to like, you're not Boruto. Like, are you really that person to me? And now we have here Himawari, who we know has been affected by the swap. But she's kind of being like, the way I view him isn't the same as the way other people view him. And obviously this is a weird one where, like, with the characters who aren't as close to Kawaki, yes, they're just going to immediately be like, yeah, he is a traitor, therefore Boruto is a traitor. But because Himawari's relationship with the two of them is that she views both of them as being her brother, one biological and then one adopted, she's of course going to have some sympathetic views to both characters because she actually got on really well with both of them. So I think regardless of the switch happening, the one of the takeaways here is that she feels some sympathy towards Kawaki, even if he was known to be the traitor specifically here. She would still want to try and help him in some way. That she wants both of her brothers in her life, basically, is the kind of idea here. But within this situation, she seems to be able to see through some of the kind of illusion kind of really that's going on here. And that is that she seems to actually know that her dad is actually alive somehow. Now, how exactly is that? Because apparently they're in a dimension that is very exclusive to Kawaki. So how can she possibly know that? The whole idea is that they're kind of in like a time lock, yet she can sense that somehow. What's going on here? Because this is where you go back to like Himawari, where we didn't really see her for the last little bit of the chapters that we had. But one of the last scenes that we did have with her was that weird scene where she met Demon for the first time, and he noted that there was something kind of special, remarkable about her, that he viewed as being like power in some way, but of course realized that like, oh wait, she can't counter me with some sort of weird power. What's going on here? So there's some innate power within Himawari here. So what's going on? But again, maybe it is the whole kind of family connection. If you are truly connected to someone, you can see through the switch of your memory and how you perceive things. And it would make sense how she'd be able to maybe see more of the truth. But what's going on here? Because they don't show her with the Byakugan here, so there's no sense that it's some special ability of her Byakugan necessarily. But we have to wait and see. But I like the idea that like Naruto and Hinata's other child, like Boruto's sister, is being presented to have something kind of unique or special going on with her. Maybe a unique power that can help Boruto going into the future. That seems like a really interesting position for her. So yeah, we then cut to Kawaki dealing with the claw mark. So of course he shrinks it down with his the Ashiki kind of eye power. And yeah, there's a bit of a discussion here about basically, like, why does he keep just, like, putting a claw mark here and there? Why doesn't he just attack us? But then it's noted that, Kawaki, you've always had the theory that Code's grudge is against Boruto much more than anyone. So he's prioritizing going after Boruto before he goes after the village. And maybe they might take each other out and the village will be spared. That's what's going on here. And obviously, as far as we're aware, Code, I think, has been affected by the switch. So he is viewing Boruto as Kawaki. And Kawaki is the one he truly has an issue with, because Kawaki was the one who was kind of almost like Ishiki's favorite, really. He was the chosen vessel and all this sort of stuff. And that's why he hates him more than anyone else. Because it was really Kawaki at the end of the day, more so than anyone else, who really resulted in Ishiki's death. So this does make sense quite a bit. But then Kawaki notes that there's a claw mark on one member of the search team. And suddenly it's kind of like panic stations. What if they all have them? The alert sort of goes out across the village, check everyone about what's actually happening here. And then, a member of the search team just walking through the streets, one of the claw grimes springs up out of the claw mark on the back of this guy's neck. And so it seems like Code's invasion of the village has actually begun. So yeah, the claw grimes, again, are the things that Code created from the Ten Tails, but they also have his claw mark power kind of like built into them. So other claw grimes can sort of pop out of one, and it's this perfect way to start an invasion, because the idea is you just plant a claw mark somewhere, one comes out, and then one comes out of the other one, and then two can come out of the two, and it just starts to kind of multiply like crazy, exponentially. And so this can be a full invasion army in no time at all. So they begin to attack everyone in the streets. So the kind of Konoha police force gets going. Any shinobi in the area kind of gets going. Konohamaru, of course, signals the kind of alert systems of the village and stuff like that. Kawaki's in the streets defending people. Sarada then jumps in to kick one of them away. And of course, when she knocks one down, another pops out of that first one, and in no time at all, there's like three of them there in front of her. But then, out of one of them, comes Code. So Code is immediately here on the scene in the village. And it's this really kind of surprise moment of like, oh yeah, whoa, out of nowhere, he's just straight away here. So he says, nice to finally meet you, Uchiha Sarada. What do you want? I'm looking for Boruto. He isn't here. He left 3 years ago. And he's like, yeah, I know. I've been chasing him for almost 2 years now, and I'm tired. He's not here. Look somewhere else. Oh, sorry, I wasn't clear. I've decided to stop looking for him. That's why I've come here. I thought I'd have his former friends, towards whom he still cares about, summon him here. And basically the idea is, I'm going to threaten you and hope that brings him out of hiding. That's Code's plan here. He is done chasing, because it's clear from what is said here. Some sort of an incident happened 1 year after basically like the previous chapter. So 1 year into the time skip, which is 3 years, there was, I guess, some sort of a Boruto and Code encounter. Sasuke obviously was involved as well. And since then, Code has more directly been going after Boruto. Up until, I suppose, very, very recently, when he's maybe been thinking about more, I probably need to go after the village to draw everyone to me, because he's just done with waiting. Now, one interesting thing about Code's design, he now has a scar over his eye. It's the eye that doesn't have the kind of triangle kind of tattoo on it. He has a scar over his eye. So, who gave him that? Is that from Sasuke? Is it from Boruto with his new sword? We don't know, but it's a cool thing to just highlight that. Oh, there's an incident from the gap period that actually kind of went down. So immediately they're telling you some important stuff at least went down during all of this time. So yeah, he says, I hope you can scream real pretty so that it will reach him. And he doesn't even get to do anything. He doesn't truly get to threaten Sarada before just out of absolutely nowhere. Like, we don't even know how exactly Boruto just appeared suddenly like this. Like, did he come from a direction? Above, below, what? Did he come out of Boruto, out of Code somehow? Or did he just, like, instantaneously teleport here? But Boruto just appears, like, standing on Code's face, basically. It's that kind of sick thinking that creeps girls out. And of course, Sarada is stunned to see Boruto after all this time, just like literally appear directly in front of her on Code. And so Code tries to just grab Boruto because he's on top of him. Boruto jumps up, but the idea is that Boruto just kind of like flips right next to Sarada, and it's this face-off, basically. It's also noted here that Kawaki senses Boruto's presence, and we then get the kind of montage through all the characters realizing this. The sensory team suddenly senses Boruto's chakra. Ada, of course, with her powers, senses Boruto has arrived as well. She can see him. Sumire spots him. And of course, Shikamaru gives the order, which is to prioritize fighting Code and the Claw Grimes. But you know, keep an eye on what Boruto is up to. Figure out why he's here and what he's actually trying to accomplish. And so we get the final 2 pages of the chapter. Boruto standing kind of epically in front of Sarada, as we get sort of the idea of this like 3-way face-off. Code, Kawaki, Boruto. The fight that we've been waiting for like ages to basically get is seemingly about to happen here. So yeah, you've finally shown yourself, Boruto. And yeah, we end on the note of Boruto looking very intense. Like, it's just a very just like, I've been through a lot, I'm serious business Boruto now. This is going to go down here and now. He is back. And that's the whole kind of idea here. And of course you have Boruto, like Sarada behind Boruto, just like absolutely like stunned that he's back, unable to believe this, of course, because she's been, I suppose, trying her best over these years to make something happen here in the village, but it hasn't. But here he is, and the setup at the end here is just, what are we doing here? What is the idea here at the end? Like, are we just trying to straight up in this first arc of Two Blue Vortex trying to deal with Code immediately? Because again, you have to think about the stuff we know into the future is the chapter 1 stuff. Boruto versus Kawaki, where there doesn't seem to be any mention of Code and what's going on with him. Of all the characters here, Code certainly feels the least important of them, because I don't think ultimately many fans have the same level of respect for Code as a villain as they do for quite a lot of other characters. So is Code just a character here to be defeated in this kind of cool epic first arc, or is there more to it? Because again, this is the guy who has apparently inherited the will of Ishiki Otsutsuki, the whole Otsutsuki will, as far as we're aware. He's the guy with the 10 tails. He wants to feed Kawaki or Boruto to that 10 tails, get a chakra fruit, and apparently, if Code eats that chakra fruit, he will become an actual Otsutsuki. And it seems like that is destined to not happen. But Kawaki's overall goal is to eliminate all Otsutsuki, which at the moment seems to just be Boruto, but we know there's a whole clan of Otsutsukis out there, and surely eventually the heads of the clan are going to come in, and this is what I've always predicted as being the kind of end game of Boruto, is the full-on Otsutsuki invasion and dealing with them, going into stuff like the origin of the Otsutsukis, why they do what they do, who is the leader, and especially now that we know about the whole like Shibai Otsutsuki, the god Otsutsuki, and we're setting up more the backstory of like all these crazy powers, it feels like we need to get into the kind of core of those details to actually resolve the series in an effective way. That if that is Kawaki's goal, he has to deal with other Otsutsukis. But it seems like right now we are dealing with this code incident. And everything we seem to know points to the fact that a post-time skip Boruto should be incredibly powerful. We assume Kawaki should be incredibly powerful. And even though Code now has his like limiters off and stuff like that, I don't know where we're meant to rate the character. A lot depends on like if they do something crazy like revealing potentially that what if Code killed Sasuke in the time skip? And that's why Sasuke isn't here really, apart from Sarada at the start. He isn't mentioned. Because again, they went off together, apparently trained together. Now Code has this random injury and this mention of something that happened like 2 years ago, 1 year after the start of the time skip. Is that kind of what happened? Because again, the idea would seem to be that like Boruto maybe has Sasuke's sword, maybe the cloak is Sasuke's and stuff like that. And he seems very serious. Like he said a bit of a quip, I suppose, to Code, which is, you know, okay, he's not like lost every other aspect of his kind of character in all of this, but he seems dead serious here, more than maybe a typical Boruto. But they of course want this kind of cool epic entrance for the character. He could easily turn around and do something kind of goofy at the start of the second chapter that's like, it's the Boruto I know type situation. But yeah, the question really is like, what do we do here? Is it a kind of truce temporarily between Kawaki and Boruto while we deal with Code, and then we get to dealing with the core issue, or what? That's what we don't know. The exact nature of like how these fights necessarily are going to play out. But I think it's very hard to not picture a scenario that is just like Code is here to just be defeated. Like, I don't know what significant role he's necessarily going to play in the story. So unless he really brings the Ten Tails into play, we basically know already he's not going to succeed, because he can only get the chakra fruit if Kawaki or Boruto dies, which we know, at least until a direct confrontation between those two happens, doesn't happen. So, you know, what are we doing here? Like, that's the big thing. And it just feels like, yep, is Code the sacrifice to hype up the other characters here? That he's going to be a powerful enemy, but he's ultimately just here to be killed in this initial arc. Hopefully there's maybe more to it than that, but interesting stuff. So I'm pretty much going to wrap things up there with, again, just the idea of, like, I think it's a good chapter. I want to be clear here, even though I have some issue with the way some of the recap was done and it being a little bit excessive. I think there's enough little tidbits of information throughout this that are strong, of like getting right back into the action here. The hype about like basically the start of chapter 2, I think, is going to be really strong, because like what happens next could be just immediately straight into the action. The teases with like Himawari being able to maybe see through an aspect of the omniscience, omnipotence, Mitsuki having a little bit of a doubt, the ongoing very interesting dynamic between like Ada, Sumire, and Sarada, about they have to work with her but also hide a secret that her other ability also doesn't work on them. That's interesting, because Ada remains a somewhat enigmatic character herself within the series, especially because the most powerful character in the series is right there next to her, protecting her the entire time. That's just super interesting by itself. Then, don't forget that Amado is also one of the most interesting characters in the series. We don't know if the omnipotence has had an effect on him, and how that's going to play a role in everything that goes on here, because there's some sort of a reveal probably that's going to still have to come out about Amado, because again, this is the guy who is responsible for basically giving Ada this power that has caused this. Like, literally, this scientist character gave Ada this crazy godlike ability. And okay, he has some skills in this regard, but what's the situation there? And then let's not forget the whole setup for him is that he wants to kind of utilize Kawaki's kind of unique situation with the karma mark to somehow revive his daughter Akebi. If it's switched around for Amado, he's looking for Boruto. So there's so many things like that that you kind of in a way can't forget, because Amado just is not mentioned here in this chapter at all, but he is key to probably some of the bigger reveals that we're going to get about what's actually going on here. So all I'd say kind of to wrap it up here is just that very good, but maybe not as hype as I maybe expected it to be. Just a little bit too introductory is probably the one thing that I would say holds it back. But I think that's the right approach to have with this, of like, be excited. If you're a fan of Boruto, be excited by all means. But like, be careful with the whole idea of hype and trying to frame this as the best thing ever, when it still fundamentally is a chapter of Boruto, written and drawn by like the same people it kind of always has been. It still, you could see, has pacing issues and stuff like, have they used the page count effectively, especially given that they have more pages here for this chapter. There are things like that that are still in play here, but certainly I think a strong start, because we ended off on a strong point. And I'm so excited to see what they do for the next chapter. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Chapter 1 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. What are your thoughts on everything going on here? But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.